Hello and welcome to episode 60 of Linux After Dark. I'm Joe.
I'm Chris.
I'm Gary.
And I'm Dalton.
Welcome back, chaps. It's the first episode of the year. It's 2024 now, definitely. And we're not recording this several weeks ago. Anyway, so that means that it is time to look back at what we hoped would happen in 2023. And then later on, we will look forward to 2024. I mean, look into this year that we're in now and not make predictions, but talk about what we'd like to see happen, ideally. So, Dalton, you hoped that in 2023 we would see more fun open source projects. And I recall saying something about fart apps, and you wanted to see that on the Steam Deck.
I think we're there. I think it happened.
Did it?
Yeah, there's a huge project. Huge in relative terms, called Deck Brew and Decky Loader that allows you to load mods into the Steam Deck interface, just straight up. Now, I have to say, you install it by downloading a .desktop file and executing it. It gets the file from the internet and pipes it into Bash.
Nice.
So, low marks there, but, you know.
Is it all open source, though?
It is. It's very nice. It's all on GitHub, and you can download tons of modifications that allow you to have achievements for the Retro Achievements project, and there's a whole list of things that you can add into your Steam Deck. It's pretty cool.
But have we seen this in the wider open source world?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that that has happened, but at least it did with the Steam Deck, which was kind of what you were aiming at anyway. So, happy days. Gary, you hope to see a proper ARM laptop running Linux from a tier 1 vendor. And we talked about that ARM ThinkPad that is pretty well supported by Linux, but not officially. And I don't think that this has come to pass, has it?
No, this hasn't really happened. I had a look on Lenovo.com loggingly last week to see if it had, and no, it hasn't happened. I still can't find anything even approaching a publicly available image that I'd want to daily drive on it. Lenovo don't do it, Dell don't do it, HP don't do it. But I guess the Mac is a little bit better supported now than it was a year ago.
It's a lot better supported, I would say.
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. You explicitly excluded the M1 and Apple hardware in general.
I know I did, and I regret that now because Apple is definitely a tier 1 hardware vendor. But no, this didn't happen, I'm afraid.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because when we're in Riga, I attended a presentation about the Snapdragon X Elite ARM chips that are coming out. And I sort of asked about the ThinkPad in the presentation that was given as well. And they had a very shiny video from Qualcomm, which had Ubuntu running on one of these Snapdragon X machines. But the problem is they've done things like released benchmarks where you think, that's quite impressive. And then you peel back the layers and Windows has 23 watt power draw and the Linux benchmark has an 80 watt one. Things like that. That's leaving aside the bring up of the hardware firmware driver stack, which, as we spoke with Mark before about, Mark Pearson from Lenovo when he came on to talk about that ARM laptop, it's just difficult. I don't care how many shiny videos Qualcomm produce. They're not making a bill of materials and software firmware stack with Linux in mind. You're not going to convince me, I'm afraid.
I genuinely, after going to the summit in Prague in 2022, I was going to say last year, but that's not last year at all now, is it? I genuinely thought they were close to having something. They had an X13S there that had Ubuntu running on it. It seemed to be running okay, and there was just a bit more hardware bring up to happen. But I guess either that didn't happen, or it never got past Lenovo's QA. I don't know.
Don't get me wrong, with the presentation, which should be on YouTube now, because I think most of them are, there's been improvements there. I don't think anyone asked about the webcam, but I still don't think that it works. And that's really what I'm getting at. And that's no disrespect to anything that was said or mentioned in that workshop. That's what I mean by hardware, firmware, software stack. When your webcam drivers are just inaccessible, that is the difficulty. I know some people would carry a USB webcam in the same way that some machines might not have working sound. And they're like, no, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I've got Bluetooth headphones and a Bluetooth speaker. It doesn't matter. But for me, I'd want everything to be able to work ideally. not that coming from an immense amount of backbending from people, but actually coming from vendor help.
Well, yeah, I also said that I hoped that we'd finally get on top of this ARM situation with proper standards and would have generic ARM images. But that has very much not happened either.
No, I think the only reason that we've got as far as we have as a community with the Macs is because there's such a small range of hardware. And it's one SoC at a time to target, and they're all relatively similar, so the bring up is quite quick.
Do you think that all the excitement around the Steam Deck and hardware like it might have kind of edged out the ARM hardware excitement this year?
I think the fact that low-end x86 hardware has gotten much better over the last year or two has probably not helped, yeah?
Well, it's like we talked about with the Wise boxes. You've got a situation, I had to shoehorn it in, sorry. You've got a situation where the power consumption is comparable now, at least on the low end.
And on 2.5 admins, when you spoke about the N95, N100 boxes that you can buy from B-Link that Jim and Alan have talked about, that Alan's bought. I don't know if Jim's got the very latest one of these, but yeah, they have single channel RAM and kind of limitations. But as we were discussing privately, I think in our kind of group chat as well, it's partly linked to bootloaders, UEFI, standardization, which is problematic even on x86. Like, it's just fragmented and difficult, and I'm not sure we're ever going to get on top of it.
Well, the alternative, of course, is UEFI and EDK2 and Tiano Core, and these massive firmware stacks that have bugs in them, as we've seen with Logo Fail just last month. Even if you have all of that firmware, having all of the software available to make the firmware happen causes its own problems. And ARM devices are very vertically integrated. But at the same time, that vertical integration means there's just less code running on them at boot, which is kind of nice in some ways. So there's ebbs and flows.
All right, Chris, you hope that Mate on Debian would get better and would allow you to switch over to Debian, essentially. And that has really worked out nicely, hasn't it, as you sit here on XFCE?
So, yes, interesting. Sneaked in at the end of the year. I've switched my work machine to Debian, and we might talk about this in more depth sometime in the future. But I tried Plasma, first of all, and I didn't stay on it for very long. And that's not a fault of Plasma necessarily. I think it was the combination of Debian stable and Plasma is probably not something that works.
Just use SID.
Well, that's also not what I wanted to do. And so I've ended up going to XFCE rather than Mate because you just can't quite get the WinPress experience still. And with XFCE, I can get everything that I want almost. I can't quite get the fonts to look as nice as they do out of the box on Ubuntu on Debian. But that might be something for a future episode. But you can't just install Debian and pick Mate as your desktop environment and do a few mouse clicks and get Ubuntu Mate, which is what I was hoping might happen. And this is in relation to a specific set of release notes from WinPress. And I'm not calling him out, by the way. Like, that's fine. But yeah, at the time, that was fairly fresh in the mind. I think it might have been 2210, maybe the release notes that had that in. And there weren't a lot of changes, particularly. And that was one of the things that was the explanation, was I haven't done a lot to Ubuntu Mate because I've been looking at upstreaming what I do into Debian. But yeah, it still looks very old out of the box, as does XFCE. But I just feel more comfortable on XFCE on Debian than I do on Mate on Debian.
One of us.
So we'll see. I'm a fortnight in now, and my work machine is my most used device, and it's incredibly snappy. And me and Joe were discussing this privately. On Plasma, when I was running it, I turned all the animations up to maximum. I don't like any of that. I know people like that. But with XFCE, they just aren't there, which I really like. Like, if I snap a window, it snaps the hell up there straight away. There's not even the pretense of animation.
Maybe one day you'll get Compiz ported to XFCE. You'll catch up soon, honest.
Maybe. Well, I hope to see more proprietary software available for Linux. And I talked about games and Adobe stuff and CAD and accounting software. And I talked about how we'd probably need snaps to make that happen. And it just didn't really come to pass. I think games have improved significantly, or somewhat at least, shall we say. Dalton, am I right in thinking there are more good games available for Linux than there were this time last year?
I think you're right in that. Possibly just because more games have released and they just support Linux. Through Proton.
Yeah. But unfortunately, no, it has not come to pass. So I'll just have to keep my fingers crossed for the big applications coming to Linux via snaps or Flatpak or what have you. Okay, this episode is sponsored by people who support us with PayPal and Patreon. Go to linuxafterdark.net/support for details of how you can support us too. Linux After Dark is part of the Late Night Linux family, which means that for $10 a month on Patreon, you can get access to an RSS feed that contains all the Late Night Linux family shows without adverts like this. There's also an option to get just this show ad-free for $5 a month. Some of the episodes are even released a day or so early for Patreon supporters. So if you like what we do and can afford it, it would be great if you could support us at linuxafterdark.net/support. All right, what do we want to see happen in 2024 then? Gary, what do you want to see?
I think for me, I'd quite like to see more apps that enable us to federate things and self-host stuff. Say, I've had a lot of success this year in pulling away from the various cloud services that I use, say iCloud Photos, Google Photos, etc., and self-hosting alternatives to those. So I've gotten rid of my Google Apps subscription this year and moved that stuff to Nextcloud. I've gotten rid of my iCloud Photos subscription this year and moved that to Image, although I'm still backing those photos up to Nextcloud because I'm slightly scared of the "this is beta, here be dragons" banner. And I'd really like to see some projects like that start cropping up that just replace the plethora of cloud or paid-for monthly services that I have. And I'm not just talking like, I want to sync some files. I'm talking it has real feature sets that you would see in the proprietary alternatives. So like the face detection stuff in Image, which I know you laughed at in a recent episode of Late Night Linux, but it was really good once you've got a real set of photos in there. Or the AI integration in Nextcloud is actually quite good. So I'd quite like to see more projects like that have feature sets that rival the platforms that I currently use.
Yeah, I think that's quite a realistic prospect.
I sure hope so, because I've just gone and built a new home server in the hope that I'm going to be able to run some of them. So we'll see how that works out.
Did you use a Wisebox for it?
No, I didn't, although the Wisebox was my gateway into my hardware choice ultimately. So I've gone with an Intel N100 board. So very similar hardware to the Wisebox.
All right.
Did you attach a Google Coral to it?
Not yet. I haven't done that.
He's going to.
No, currently it's got, I think, 4 8TB disks in a RAID Z1, and it's got a couple of 1TB SSDs in a mirror. It's pretty small, but hopefully it'll do everything I need for the next year or so.
I have 24 terabytes of storage. It's pretty small.
Yeah. Well, it has meant that like all of the random hard drives with archive stuff on are at least now on an online array that's got scrubs and things running. So I feel a little bit better about it than I once did.
Get you.
I know.
Dalton, what do you want to see happen?
So always to be the one who's got the philosophical, up your ass kind of stuff.
Oh, he's going to get the Cal Newport out, isn't he? Come on.
Yep.
I guess I hope that our good enough options either get better or stay good enough this year. When I say that, I do talk about, sorry if there's anyone from Mozilla listening, Mozilla. And, Nextcloud and these companies that aren't perfect by any means, but they're at least better than the alternatives. I hope that these institutions that we have that we all complain about profusely at least stay as good as they are now. And that feels like a really hard hope this year. So I'm going with the low bar.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have seen it with companies like Red Hat and Canonical doing some not ideal things. And so, yeah, even staying the same and not getting worse would probably be an overall win.
And we can name drop a ton of companies here and a ton of nonprofits even. And it's just try to stay cool. Thanks.
Yeah, don't give in to enshittification is what you're saying.
Yeah, we can live in hope.
Positive start to the year. Well, I'm hoping that Wayland support significantly improves on smaller desktops, the likes of Mate and XFCE. We've seen it with GNOME and Plasma that it's pretty solid now, and even Ubuntu is planning to at least offer a Wayland session on 24.04 and probably go default for 24.10. Whereas the likes of Mate and XFCE, the kind of less popular GTK desktops, seem to be a bit falling behind, let's say. But I hope that they catch up and we at least get some sort of Wayland session that at least sort of works.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was talking about my experiments with Debian, the thing about the Plasma Wayland session, which is nice to find, is things like having different types of screen are much more workable than in wrangling xrandr. And it's a thorny topic. Like, it comes up in the group chat, or if you visit any kind of forum and search the word Wayland, it causes a lot of arguments. It's kind of the system D of this era, I think. There's some people that are absolutely furious that it's happening.
People aren't done being mad about systemd yet.
Well, yes, but I mean, you're right. And there's always, hello to our Dev1 friends and Antics and MX Linux. I know they're all things and it's perfectly possible to run a different init, but I do feel like largely there's less upfront anger compared to the display server. But yeah, it is nice to be able to go, I want this resolution, this refresh rate over here, tacked on over here. And it's not a kind of tacked together display server kind of bolting them on based on a paradigm that's slightly old. And let's face it, as people have made the point before, you might love X11, but the development work is not going into it in the same way anymore.
Nobody loves X11.
But people do, Joe.
People use X11.
Yeah. They don't want to change, but they don't love X11, surely. No one can.
I mean, I don't really love watching videos with tearing in them. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the same boat, Pipewire is getting better and better all the time. And that's been nice too. Just being able to hook up Bluetooth headphones without having to faff around with Pulse Audio for 2 years. So nice. And not having transmitting your 44.1 kilohertz audio at 48K and just getting the wrong tone. So much better. Things are getting better.
I was quite shocked the first time I used Bluetooth headphones on Linux for a call and someone didn't tell me I sounded terrible at the other end. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a thing I can do now.
I'm still too scared to try it.
It's good. It works really, really well. I do it every day now, which a year ago I couldn't have dreamed of. So things are improving.
So Chris, what are you hoping that'll happen?
Well, Phelan's not going to be happy, but it is AI and machine learning. But it's a divisive topic. And my hope is actually that it just fucking settles down a bit. The thing that annoys me more than anything at the moment is the hype train that surrounds it. And what I'd like to see is that it settles down. If you think about Linux Matters recently, when Martin and Alan have talked about the strengths of using something like Copilot to help factor code, I do think as assistive tools, or the AI audio transcription, I had to play around with some FOSS tools of transcribing an episode of Linux Matters, but it was quite involved, and the service that Alan found, I think, was just clean and efficient. And yeah, you have to pay a slight fee for it, but those kind of things, there are positives to it. And I just hope that the kind of glow of supposed newness, because it's not new, it's advancements in hardware and changes. But I do just hope that everyone just calms down a little bit and it finds its groove. Because at the moment, it just feels like, I'm going to go and take a shit in a train station and it's going to go, I'll try our new machine learning assisted toilet paper that can tell you whether you've got some kind of medical disorder. It makes me angry. It's a buzzword now and it's pissing me off.
Yeah, it's very much the new blockchain.
Exactly. But I don't want it to go away at all. And I don't think it's a complete load of bollocks. I think there is mileage in some aspects of it. I think everyone just needs to calm down.
Yeah, like Gary said, with Image and Nextcloud, there are some really good uses of it, but there's just way too much hype. So yeah, I agree with you. I really hope that does settle down and we stop having just all the bullshit and then just have some actual useful machine learning stuff that can help us with our daily lives.
And I think it does tie in with what you said, Gary, about Nextcloud, for example. We're starting to get to the point where you can get hardware yourself to run things that for a while were offloaded to the cloud. If you think about things like Alexa when it first started, the devices themselves were very weak because they were using a neural network in the cloud. But, you know, the University of Helsinki have shown that you can have a ChatGPT style model, which is fully open. Obviously, progress of all of this stuff marches on. But the fact that you can start to self-host things, like you said, Dalton, it links again. I hope things stay good. That's good enough. You don't necessarily need all of the features, but to be able to do some of these advancements in the way that we would prefer to do them, I think would be a win.
I will take a solid C+ this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the things for me is that I've tried really, really hard to avoid any AI, ML stuff. And then I look at all of the announcements from the big tech companies this year, and they are all around AI, ML. And I think people I work with are getting sick of it. Like, I've literally seen people just leave calls as soon as AI, ML comes up recently. But now I'm seeing models that I can run locally that can do things in a reasonable amount of time, and the results are decent. I'm a little bit more interested than just throwing them at a cloud service.
Well, do let us know what you hope will happen in this year. You can email us show@linuxafterdark.net. But we'd better get out of here. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Chris.
I've been Gary.
And I still sound better than Joe's chair.
Oh, I can't make it do it. Oh, well.
No!
See you later.